Okay, welcome back to Master Learn, where we cover all things art of learning, metaphysics, and career development. And I thought this article was interesting. Dreams might be warning us about our brain health. This is something that we can all relate to, as we all have to sleep at some point. And sleep in itself is a deep topic because largely to scientists, it seems, mostly Western scientists, uh, dreams are still mysterious. And it appears that the Western scientists don't or still don't understand why we dream. There's more understanding about why we sleep, as the body requires time to recover, rejuvenate. But the act of dreaming, where we appear to be having experiences that resemble the world out here, still seems to elude the Western scientists. And I say Western because it does not elude all scientists. It does not elude all cultures or civilizations that exist or have existed. There are some that do understand dreams and what they do and how to work with them. So throughout the channel here and our time together discussing all these articles and topics, you will hear me reference a lot and being explicit about the differences. So I'll say Western, and I'm typically speaking about the Western hemisphere, or the Western culture, Western United States and North America and Europe, right? These lands, as opposed to, I would reference Eastern ways of thinking, Eastern science, Eastern culture, or another term I may use is indigenous. Right? This is to mean very old or ancient, and it's important to note that as we're talking about topics like programming, especially from our previous videos and words, there's an assumption that to be old or to be ancient, quote unquote, or to be indigenous is equivalent to being less advanced. And that in itself is a Western perspective because the Western mindset thinks linearly. So as an example, it is assumed that the 1800s were less advanced than the 1900s just because the time that has been captured has advanced, as opposed to looking at what within the cultures or the civilizations have improved well-being, improved life, improved health, improved relationships, improved all these areas that cover the spectrum of living. Rather than looking at that, it is automatically assumed that the farther back we go in time, the less advanced people have been compared to this time. And what seems to be at the measurement or the measuring stick of that is the technology, the material technology or the external technology. So you'll hear this reference, and we're going to go deeper into these topics as time goes by. But let's cover here the dreams, right? Dreams might be warning us about our brain health. They say warning here. Warning is an important word as it gives us some idea that dreams have signals. They tell us something, right? We're just not experiencing them just because. It also gives the implication that there is nothing really going to waste in the body, as there was a period of time where people thought the appendix, right, was wasteful. People also thought that the tissue where the corners of the eyeballs have also been useless. People also thought that the pineal gland was useless. That's not true as well. So dreams themselves, nothing in the universe is wasted. Nothing that is created naturally or emerges naturally from the Most High is useless, right? It has a function, and we just may not know what those functions are. We have to discover them. So this scientist says dream disorders could be a sign of future disease. Fascinating that this would tell us that there's a disorder in the dream. So let's explore this. Let's see what they mean by that. What are your dreams trying to tell you? Research suggests they could be warning you about disease risk factors. Fascinating projection here, which tells us that the dream, something immaterial, would be able to signal to us something going on in the material. And this aligns with the statement, which you may have heard of, especially if you are a student or an aspirant in these matters: as above, so below, as within, so without. All to say that the material, the things that exist physically, by physically we mean density level, right? Here in third density, things that have solid and mass, right? And are also perceivable by our collective five senses. These matters are subject to immaterial principles, meaning the physical thing cannot come into physical existence or dense existence unless something has conceived of it immaterially. And we can verify this through our own experience, and that this computer that I'm using to record here and speak with you had to come from someone's imagination first. It was immaterial first. It wasn't here at one point. And there was a conception in the mind, which then prompted the execution of gathering of resources, materials, to bring it here in the physical plane, or the third density plane. You can do this with experiment with anything you're seeing, right? Touching, smelling, tasting. Something that has been created by an individual was not always here. Therefore, it had to come from the immaterial, the mind. Let's continue. According to Dr. John Peever, a neuroscience researcher at University of Toronto, your dreams could actually be warning you about potential neurological disease. This researcher has identified the specific parts of the brain associated with dreaming and has found some surprising connections between them and neurological disease. Peever presented his findings at the 2017 Canadian Neuroscience Meeting, the annual meeting of the Association Canadian des Neurosciences, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Nothing too big there, aside from the fact that this concept, this idea, was proposed in mass at a major conference. So this is good to see, I think, because it prompts further conversation, much more conversation. But as we'll see, I suspect, and a lot of the articles that we cover here together, usually covering them with you for the first time, so we get some fresh connections, some new discussion. I usually am not pre-reading the articles. The topics will fascinate me. I will briefly skim, and then we'll cover them in detail together. So let's see what else they have to say about this. While a huge body of folk wisdom abounds about dreams, including predicting the future or unlocking subconscious desires, Very Deep here will explore that nugget. They still represent a somewhat fuzzy area for scientists. This is exactly what we were talking about earlier, right? We're talking about a huge body of folk wisdom, right? So the folk wisdom is being separated from the science, right? Folk wisdom and science. Now, who calls folk wisdom folk wisdom? The civilizations that have this knowledge don't call their knowledge folk wisdom. It's wisdom, and it's science for them. It's science understood in a different way. For the Western scientist, again, remember, right? We're talking about Western, right? So we're in the vicinity of Toronto, Canada. So the Western scientists perceive this as folk wisdom, whereas they have a fuzzy area or fuzzy idea or unclear understanding of dreams because they still see the folk wisdom as not science and not worthy enough to be placed within the realms of science. And a note on science, science means to know, right? Science is knowledge. So it's important to remember the differences in the mindsets of who the scientist is and what type of science, what type of approach that scientist is taking. Because an indigenous person, right, who's, let's say that they've grown up in a community where dreams are a normalcy and exploring dreams, this is normal. Have conversations about them with the elders, right, or the sages in their community. And the sages, through both their talent, and we talked about talent in previous video, their talent and cultivation of the ability to enter dreams and understand the archetypes within these dreams, the sages are able to provide tutelage to people about how dreams work. Over time, this builds a body of science, a body of wisdom. It's a body of precise understanding. So for the Western scientists to have a fuzzy area, and on this topic is not surprising, or it ought not to be surprising. Because you can see here, it says a huge body of folk wisdom abounds about dreams, including predicting the future or unlocking subconscious desires. Even though this is pretty blatant about the quote unquote folk wisdom, it's still blurry for the scientists. Why are they not exploring this capacity here, predicting the future, unlocking subconscious desires? And if they are, it would be wonderful to see these more at the forefront. But I suppose this article is what they're trying to allude to, right? Trying to enter this area. Why don't they just go talk to the sages? It's another topic. Sages won't just spill the beans to everyone. And while we're concerned with the science of dreaming, the article continues, it's no secret that the subject comes with a certain mystique. Now, this is important as well, right? So we're going to look at these words. Again, remember, words create the worlds. Fuzzy, mystique, mysterious, right? Unknown, secretive. Those words are only valid for those on one side of the knowledge. If you are trying to solve a puzzle and you don't know the solution, you don't understand how to do it, then it is mysterious to you. But the one who knows how to solve the puzzle, it is not mysterious to that individual. It is a science. It's a knowledge. So be careful of these words, right? And just know that when you understand something, you clear the way, quote unquote, and you pull back the curtain to understand it. It is no longer a mystery to you. You become an understander of the knowledge, and then if you continue to cultivate, you become an engineer of that knowledge, so you know how to use it or apply it. Some humans have solved complex scientific problems in their dreams, while others seek to control their dreams. In recent years, though, neuroscience has given us a greater understanding of the dreaming brain, including some exciting insights into what areas of the brain are associated with particular subject matter in your dreams. I think this is really cool because this goes right into the engineer element. So it's not to place one over the other, right? Quote unquote folk wisdom over the Western scientific approach. It is a synthesis. How do we obtain the synthesis? in our cells. So we understand the powers, right, of dreaming, and then we also understand what's happening in the brain when we do dream. In seeking to answer some basic questions about how we dream, Peever identified neurons called REM active neurons. Scientists have known for decades that rapid eye movement sleep, or REM, which is the stage of sleep during which we dream, is associated with the brain stem. But now Peever has indicated the role of these REM active neurons in dreaming. Scientists can study the role these particular neurons play in neurological function. They found that controlling these cells essentially lets them control dreaming. Important to note here, and it's important, this is why we have these discussions multi-layered. Throughout the channel, your education will increase tenfold because you are going to be challenged and engaged to think multi-layered and whole brain. By that, I mean, when you see language like this, the cells are not essentially, they're not really doing the work, right? The cells are the intermediaries. The cells are the material. If we go back to this as above, so below, the cells are the material manifestation of an immaterial force. Therefore, it's not the cells that do the controlling. There are immaterial spiritual capacities in the mind that work through the medium of the cells. So you must keep in mind that this is not like the conversation can be had where these material, pieces of chemistry operate without any kind of director. This is part of where Western science seems to get lost, in that they think that, like, for example, they'll say like the brain does this, the brain does that, right? The brain is doing it through as a medium of a spiritual capacity or immaterial capacity, immaterial force. When we switch on these cells, it continues, it causes a rapid transition into REM sleep, says Peever in a statement. And since scientists have identified a function of these cells, they can examine the health of people who display dysfunction in these cells. The results reveal startling implications for people who suffer from abnormal dreaming cycles, such as REM sleep behavior disorder. That's pretty straightforward. We observed that more than 80% of people who suffer from REM sleep disorder eventually develop a very long word here, synucleinopathies, such as Parkinson's disease and Lewy body's dementia, says Peever in his statement. It's another area too of focus, right? When you're studying the Western sciences, you're going to see quite a lot of long names like this. And it kind of makes you wonder, or it ought to make you wonder, why can't these words be described in different ways, right? Or simplified? Why are they so long? It is very similar to any other field that has specialized words to kind of keep the knowledge internal, keeping it in the family, so to speak. But once you understand what they are, you make up your own names. Says Peever in a statement, our research suggests that sleep disorders may be an early warning sign for diseases that may appear some 15 years later in life. Now, why would a sleep disorder manifest 15 years later in life? What could be taking so long for that to happen? This goes into quite a bit of forecasting and thinking of timelines. So we talked about timelines in a previous video. Being able to recognize a challenge, something going on in our lives at this point, can empower us to foresee potential futures if we think deep enough and expand our imagination wide enough, such that we can avoid certain timelines by choosing other timelines. If John Doe, for example, realized that he had a sleep disorder based on this information, and that 15 years later he could cultivate a disease. If he is a sharp aspirant, if he is conscious, right, quote unquote, and his ability to see into the future timelines is cultivated, John Doe would say, I don't want to develop this in, I don't want to develop an issue in a decade because I could see how that would affect my life and the people around me and my relationships and my life quality. So I'm going to change the timeline right now. I'm going to cut that out by making an adjustment to my sleep cycle or whatever the case may be in order to handle it. And what ends up happening is by making that adjustment here in the present, that future timeline or one of many timelines gets dissolved. Or another way to say it, because everything that exists, right? Everything that has happened exists, everything that will happen exists, everything that is happening exists, right? All in the moment. And so it's a matter of focus and intent. So John Doe would just say, hey, I choose not to manifest this illness down the line. So I'm making some changes right now. And then he doesn't have to worry about it anymore. He's on a particular timeline that he's choosing to create, and he follows the pathway. While this is just an early stage of this type of research, the article continues, Peever is optimistic that as scientists better understand how dreaming disorders are associated with later disease development, they may be able to develop strategies to help protect against developing these diseases. And then an abstract here, looks like the article ends, a little note about the author of this piece. It's a very fascinating topic. A lot that we have explored here with dreaming and the brain and timelines. You'll see that a lot of these knowledges, these principles come up quite often because things are synthesized. So hope this was enjoyable to explore with me. Looking forward to covering the next one. Be well.